Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Tuesday, December 10th. We're into the double digits in December 10th, 2024. Time for yet another show and counting down the days. I guess it's kind of pointless, but I don't know. Every once in a while there'll be a milestone of some importance and excitement to start counting down the days until Donald Trump is supposed to be gone again. But more to the point, I suppose we're about 40 days. If you're thinking about building an ark, say, in between now and inauguration, you got about 40 days to get that done. It's already raining, so, you're on track, biblically speaking. It just has to not stop between now and then we can all float away in the end. All right. So let's see. Goodness, there's so much to catch up on and so little time to do it with. But we'll make our best effort here. Just a moment. And reliant still on every once in a while, still just need one of those fantastic cold ease lozenges, but they just don't dissolve all that quickly. That's what makes them so great. They last so long, but they aren't designed with radio play in mind, I don't suppose. Anyway, like I said, lots to catch up on. I guess some of the air out of the tires of the folk legend of the CEO shooter, for one thing. They've arrested a guy who they say they think that shooter is. And, sounds pretty solid. I guess they arrested a guy, one, he had a backpack and a pistol in the backpack and a manifesto in the backpack. So if it wasn't him, he was on his way to becoming a CEO killer somewhere else, I guess. But it's weird circumstances. The whole thing, of course, is weird from top to bottom. Arrested in Altoona, Pennsylvania, which, I don't know how ridiculous that is. I suppose he had traveled to New York City to carry out his assassination. That made a certain amount of sense. That's where the guy he wanted to kill was. Altoona, well, that's out of the way, right? I guess, suppose if you're trying to duck the authorities at this point, you might do something like that. And I guess the weirdness was the circumstances under which he was said to have been found. He was in a McDonald's, which by itself is not at all unusual. And, where else are you going to go? Although, as it turns out, there's a lot of weirdness about it. So he found in a McDonald's, arrested in a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. It was said originally, the first report that I saw was that he had been spotted in the McDonald's by an elderly patron of the McDonald's who thought he looked like the few photos that they've managed to scrounge up of the person who was at that point a person of interest. And I don't know. Maybe plenty of sharp-eyed elderly folks out there still. On the other hand, the typical trope is, the elderly patrons, perhaps the elderly patrons at McDonald's more so than others, I don't know, don't always have the greatest eyesight. And the likelihood, if you're sitting in a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania, the likelihood of being right, even if you're like, that guy really looks a lot like the pictures, unless somebody has a clown nose on or something, there's something real giveaway. And they've still got it when they get to McDonald's in Altoona. I don't know. I'd have lots of doubt. That guy looks, wouldn't it be funny if? But I wouldn't pick up the phone and call the police. Probably. Although later the story then changed a little bit, and I heard reports of it being a McDonald's employee who had made the identification. And everyone knows that the employees of McDonald's have 20/20 vision and photographic memories. So, I don't know. I'm not sure, and certainly could be something in the middle, and the stories just got screwed up, and some reporters picked up on one piece and others have picked up on another, and an elderly customer thought that it might be them and they told a McDonald's employee to call the police because, I don't know, in the movies, that's what you do, even though almost everybody has a phone now at this point. But, maybe they were very elderly. I have great eyesight, but I'm extremely elderly, and my jitterbug phone just doesn't work here in the McDonald's. The cell signal is terrible. Pick up the house phone that everyone knows that McDonald's have and call the police hotline. Anyway, I don't really know. I didn't really bear too much on it. The bigger story of it, I guess, is that the guy, well, for one thing, everybody had a great time pointing out that the suspect's name here, the person of interest who has been arrested and charged, or I don't know, they've been charged yet or not. First of all, first name Luigi, not all that common, and of course engendering tens of thousands of Super Mario Brothers jokes, but Luigi Mangione, which also then of course, sparked not tens of thousands, but tens of 1970s jazz fusion flugelhorn jokes, because Chuck Mangione, and you have to be somebody who, if you were making that joke in a McDonald's, they would say you're an elderly patron of McDonald's, for instance, right? So, okay, but apparently Luigi Mangione, which also lots of jokes about, like, this is Sacco and Vanzetti's third accomplice here. So, like, are you kidding? An Italian anarchist is doing this? We've been 100 years too late for this. But as of some interest, he comes from a rather prominent family in Maryland, in the Baltimore area, as a matter of fact. And so the Baltimore papers get to, say, local man, is world famous healthcare CEO assassin. They get to take the local person angle on these things. I have the Baltimore Banner, which I'm not familiar with, but it appears to me to be like a locally focused thing, as opposed to like the Baltimore Sun, the national scope newspaper. This is local issues, local events. Maybe I don't know whether it's weekly or daily, but at any rate, the Baltimore Banner takes this headline direction. They're asking us, who is Luigi Mangione, scion of Baltimore family, charged in UnitedHealthcare CEO's killing? So I guess he was charged. I guess the headline that I had spotted yesterday was Towson man taken into custody, questioned in UnitedHealthcare CEO's killing. And I guess the headline has changed. Towson, not Baltimore, but another major-ish metropolitan area in Maryland. There aren't that many of them. But at any rate, this, I think, will help explain the prominent family angle. It's kind of weird. And I imagine, they must get around to it in this narrative, but you'll see what jumps out, and what jumped out at a lot of people who then started doing some research. Tim Prudente, Brenna Smith, and Ellie Wolf are the reporters who get the byline for this piece as soon as I get the pop-up out of the way from the Baltimore Banner. Luigi Mangione is from Towson and a 2016 Gilman School valedictorian, locally famous private academy, I guess. A valedictorian of the prestigious Gilman School, we said a prominent local family, and a scion of a prominent Baltimore area family. Luigi Nicholas Mangione was charged late Monday in the killing of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Police arrested the 26-year-old from Towson Monday in the morning after receiving a tip. Oh, he was there for breakfast at McDonald's. Receiving a tip that he had been recognized at a McDonald's near Altoona, Pennsylvania. Mangione was carrying a 3D printed pistol. Oh, that's very interesting, because I've heard a lot about, well, not a lot, but a lot of different versions of what was going on. One, of course, that he had a silencer on his pistol, which made him very cool and international assassin-y. And second, that the second version of the story that was circulating yesterday was that he had one of those quote-unquote ghost guns. In other words, a gun put together from parts ordered on the internet, and so therefore that does not carry an overall serial number with which the gun could be traced. I don't know. A hot trend that's out there. And I guess something that maybe a 26-year-old bro of means might, in fact, put together for themselves. But now described as a 3D printed pistol, which is really, well, something of a different story. But I guess not. This still doesn't take us outside of the very online bro territory here. A black silencer also on his person and a fake New Jersey driver's license. Altoona police wrote in their charging documents they recognized him from the wanted photos they wrote. And I did see a couple of people sort of, theorizing that, are you sure really? An elderly patron and or a McDonald's employee spotted him from the one or two photos that they managed to get of his face uncovered by the mask. It wasn't that there wasn't enough face in there, but it's just not much to go on, one or two photos like that. And believing that you have the guy of all places in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Are you sure? But the theory was, well, that maybe the police had in fact traced him using some sort of surveillance technology that they either weren't supposed to be using or weren't authorized to use at the moment or didn't want people to know they had or whatever. And so they came up with a story about elderly patrons recognizing him from the photos. It's not impossible that they were just picked up from, this person was just picked out from the photos. I mean, now that you've gotten a look at him, from his social media and his mugshot as well, he is pretty distinctive and he has pretty gigantic eyebrows and has a very weirdly, I guess, infectious and gigantic smile. Not so much in the mugshot, but you get the idea. Anyway, this is the sort of thing that people are chatting about when they're discussing a story like this. It takes on, the ring of a fable almost in this way. Folkloric hero here. But as it turns out, the more you read about what this person has been into online, the less comfortable you may be celebrating them as a folk hero, for instance, if you ever did. All right. Well, at any rate, when he was asked if he had been to New York recently, Mangione, quote, became quiet and started to shake, police wrote in charging documents. I don't know if that's supposed to mean, did the police ask him that when they first detained him, or is that something somebody in the McDonald's asked him? I guess that's supposed to mean that he was put off his game and he thought people had recognized him and he got nervous. Although, in the middle of a shooting, he had everybody convinced that he was some sort of professional international hitman because of the calm and collection with which he cleared the jam in his, 3D printed pistol and carried out his assassination despite the jam. So, that's the usual moment where nerves overtake people, and it didn't bother him then, but being asked if he had recently been in New York, i.e. getting caught, I guess that got him. Late Monday, Manhattan prosecutors filed murder and other charges against Mangione, according to an online court docket. He remained jailed in Pennsylvania, where he was charged with possession of an unlicensed firearm, forgery, and providing false identification to police. Serious charges in Pennsylvania. Thompson, 50, was gunned down Wednesday in Manhattan, and the brazen sidewalk killing launched a 5-day manhunt and captured attention across the country. The spotlight descended on the Baltimore suburbs on Monday as word spread that he was a member of a large and well-known Italian-American family. Cars and traffic cones blocked the entrance to the Hayfields Country Club, where his parents live, as reporters gathered there and on the Towson Street where he grew up. So it remains to be seen whether or not any of the populist shine comes off of this situation when you find out, actually his family was fairly well-to-do. In fact, probably just outright rich. Given what I've read about, not that every member of the family had millions of dollars at their disposal, and you can still fall prey to exorbitant insurance and healthcare costs even when well-to-do. That is certainly the case here in America. We all recognize that, and if you're just trying to, deal with your finances and your own healthcare at the same time, it can be enormously frustrating when you run into a brick wall with companies like this. Don't murder people, but whatever. Where were we? Oh, yes, right. The cars and traffic cones were blocking the entrance to the Hayfields Country Club in order for everyone to be able to continue to live there in peace and quiet. Police said Mangione was born and raised in Maryland with ties to San Francisco. Those San Francisco liberals. He lived in Honolulu, Hawaii until recently. He worked in data engineering, according to his LinkedIn profile. A friend and former roommate speaking on CNN said Mangione had needed surgery earlier this year, and that Mangione showed him heinous, as it says here, images of screws in his spine. Wish you hadn't showed me that, sir. When you're in your early 20s and you can't do basic things, it can be really difficult. R.J. Martin, this friend, had said. Martin said Mangione had surgery earlier this year. Martin remembers Mangione as a thoughtful person. Mangione graduated cum laude from the Gilman School in 2016. The school's headmaster issued a statement calling the matter deeply distressing. When he graduated at the time, he was a very promising student, and I think they mentioned here valedictorian, and so there was all sorts of effusive praise of him, as there often are of most valedictory students. Little did they know. Right. So now they're, cleaning up their web pages and everything. It's not your fault, Gilman School. But of course, schools like that claim credit for molding these students into the people they are when they graduate with honors like that. And then, if they go on to do something infamous and crazy like this, no, we didn't have anything to do with that. Anyway. We recently became aware that the person arrested in connection with the killing of the UnitedHealthcare CEO is a Gilman alumnus, Luigi Mangione. Class of 2016, Henry P.A. Smith, I guess it's Smith rather than Smythe, S-M-Y-T-H, said, "This is deeply distressing news on top of an already awful situation. Our hearts go out to everyone affected. We didn't do it." In his valedictory speech at the North Baltimore School, Mangione praised the school for instilling in him the incredible courage to explore the unknown and try new things. Well, that's a new one. Murder. Anyway, according to an excerpt of from the school website, that same year, in a Baltimore Fishbowl article, a publication I'm not familiar with, but spotlighting local valedictorians, Mangione outlined his ambition to study artificial intelligence. I think he did that. Mangione entered the prestigious all-boys school in the 6th grade and showed an interest in computer science, according to the school yearbook. He interned with Uproar Studios, an online games company. Here's a screenshot of him in his Gilman fleece pullover sweater thingy here and holding some tools that he's working. Oh, no, actually looks like looks like some sort of precision measurement tool, but it's actually the two-man bar off of a foosball table, if you look closely. But at any rate, there he is in the yearbook. And then he goes on to the also very prestigious University of Pennsylvania, where Mangione completed both a bachelor's and master's degree in computer science with a focus on artificial intelligence. One summer, he taught AI at a Stanford University pre-college program in California. He also interned as a programmer for the Hunt Valley-based Firaxis Games from 2016 to 17, according to his LinkedIn profile. So his computer science interest manifesting itself in, unsurprisingly, work in the video games industry, where I guess he was spending a lot of his recreational time. And there's some reports today, once again, attempting to link someone's violence to video gaming for some reason. I thought we were past that, but I guess not. After graduation, Mangione joined TrueCar, an online car marketplace, as a data engineer, according to his LinkedIn profile. Gilman classmate Freddie Leatherbury, how do you like that, called the news of his arrest a total shock. He was a smart kid. He was a nice kid, and he was relatively unassuming, Leatherbury said. He had a healthy social circle and was very well read. He had a lot going for him. Everyone has been sharing his online, like Amazon reading list that he was recommending to others, and very well read. Apparently, lots of Ayn Rand, and the list was topped by The Lorax by Dr. Seuss for some reason. But lots of very online red-pilled libertarian bro reading on the list, as it turns out. So for those of you who are worried that he was going to turn out to be some kind of Antifa or liberal-leaning and anarchist type, no, 3D printed gun online libertarian bro. Quite the opposite. Leatherbury and Mangione weren't close friends in school, but he was still upset to hear the news. I'm sure that's true, because he was a nice kid who had everything going for him. He said, I guess he just got caught up in some ideologies after school. Yeah, okay, it wasn't the school. Something has to go pretty wrong to lead to this. Social media posts depict a software engineer who traveled to Puerto Rico, San Diego, and Honolulu, where he lived briefly. That's nice. He posted about philosophy and popular science, quoting figures like lifestyle guru Tim Ferriss and health podcaster Andrew Huberman. Is it Huberman? I don't know. Huber. Anyway, his profile on the social media site X, that's Twitter, featured a photo of him backpacking next to a photo of an X-ray showing a spine with hardware associated with a lumbar fusion. Law enforcement sources told the Associated Press that Mangione had writings with him when he was arrested that appeared to be critical of the health insurance industry. The Mangione's family's interests in Baltimore reach from development to politics and civic life. How so? His late grandfather, Nicholas Mangione Sr., who died in 2008, was a self-made real estate developer who owned country clubs, nursing homes, and a radio station. The radio station becomes important later. And his grandmother, Mary, who died in 2023 from Parkinson's disease, was described in an obituary as a hospital benefactor and music patron. They purchased Turf Valley Country Club in Ellicott City in 1978. I know of it, establishing it as a golf course resort and residential community, and later Hayfields Country Club in, I don't know, that's Cockeysville or Cokesville. How do they pronounce that up in Maryland? I've seen the signs for it, but I've never had to pronounce it loud. But they purchased it in 1986. Family businesses include the Lorien Health Services, interestingly enough, nursing homes, which I'm sure are run beautifully and nobody has any complaints about, and the radio station, WCBM AM. Mary Mangione was a supporter of the Catholic Archdiocese of Baltimore, Greater Baltimore Medical Center, the Old Baltimore Opera Company, and the Walters Art Museum, eventually becoming a Walters trustee. Now, some politics thrown in the mix. State Delegate Nino Mangione is Antonio. It's his first name, known as Nino. Nino Mangione, a Baltimore County Republican, is a cousin, his office confirmed. The lawmaker issued a statement on social media Monday night on behalf of the family, noting that it could not comment on reports of Luigi Mangione's arrest. We only know what we've read in the media. Our family is shocked and devastated by Luigi's arrest. We offer our prayers to the family of Brian Thompson, and we ask people to pray for all involved, the family wrote. We are devastated by this news. And I'm sure they are, and there's no real reason to believe that they had anything to do with it. But it is interesting. He came from a fairly prominent, wealthy Republican, conservative Republican family. Nino Mangione is apparently known as something of a hard right member of the Republican Party. And apparently, I don't know whether they're going to discuss it later on in this article or not, but we might as well sum it up here. I mentioned that the radio station that the family owned becomes important. Nino Mangione is he's been described as a locally known conservative radio talk show host. And he is, and it may have been, part of his rise to election as a state delegate. Apparently, it has come up as a campaign finance issue for him in the past as well. But in case you were wondering, he's developed this talent for political rhetoric and rode it to popularity and political power. Sure, that happens from time to time. In case you're wondering how he got the radio show, is it his fantastic talent? Maybe, maybe not, but his family owns the radio station, so that probably helped. And then meanwhile, as I said, he's talking up all of his political positions while he's running for office, and all around apparently all around the radio station, they had his posters up and everything. And the campaign finance authorities were like, hey, this is an unreported in-kind contribution to your campaign. And he says, I don't really feel that way. Yeah, well, you feel wrong. That's your problem. Anyway, Thompson, of course, killed Wednesday outside the New York Hilton in Midtown Manhattan, where UnitedHealthcare's parent company, the United Health Group, was holding its annual investor conference, the police said. The shooter appeared to be lying in wait for several minutes before approaching the executive from behind and opening fire. He used a 9mm pistol that police said resembled the guns, this is an interesting observation, resembled the guns that farmers use to put down animals without causing a loud noise. I've never really noted the 9mm as being that kind of weapon in particular, but I guess so. In the days since the shooting, police turned to the public for help by releasing a collection of photos and video, including footage of the attack, as well as images of the suspect at a Starbucks beforehand. You gotta have your coffee. And then, of course, the word of the markings on the shell casings, delay, deny, depose. Retracing the gunman's steps with surveillance video. Investigators searched Central Park kind of half-heartedly the other day. But yes, it all came together after finding out, I guess, that getting the tip that he's in Altoona, and I guess they must have traced him through taking a Greyhound bus on his way out of Manhattan and then out to Altoona. So it looks like he was trying to kind of move around quietly and keep a low profile. He certainly could have used family resources or tapped into family resources to travel in higher style, but of course more traceable style. Anyway, just found that very interesting. And in case you were wondering about background, ideology, etc., family-wise, it's certainly very conservative Republican, but somehow this will all be blamed on Democrats, probably just with some lies. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right. Welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We own the station. So, of course, I guess, Netroots Radio, not actually in my own ownership portfolio, per se, but nice people nonetheless. I own the show. How about that? I guess I could take it anywhere. But, okay, well, that was an interesting local-ish angle on the suspect in the shooting. I don't know. I'm not sure how much I trust the screenshotted and social media shared information about just how weird his online writing was. It certainly seems bizarre and, you know, not out of keeping with the writing you might be reading from other people who are driven to strange and depraved acts like this. But if the early reports and early shared information is to be believed, he has some rather specific concerns and rather specific, like we said, red-pilled, online, very bro-ish kind of worries about population collapse, rather to say specific types of populations, specific demographics of certain, or the collapse of certain demographics vis-a-vis some others which are growing, let's say, and a very strange set of specific complaints about perhaps Japanese culture and its ability to sustain itself. And I don't know what to tell you. I mean, you're going to have to look for yourself. But he had some very weird complaints. The ones we would feel, let's say, more comfortable talking about on a morning radio program with mixed company, I guess, is that he had some very specific complaints about conveyor belt sushi and vending machine places that upset him greatly. That you should be interacting in person with wait staff, not simply grabbing sushi off of a conveyor belt. That doesn't seem like a huge societal problem to me, but I understand the rooting in, well, gosh, shouldn't we all be practicing our social interactions? Yeah, sure. I don't know that the conveyor belt sushi is depressing population growth per se. Like you're only supposed to just ask the waiter or wait staff for food and then pay them. You're not supposed to reproduce with them at the restaurant. But I don't know. He had some very specific concerns. Plus some complaints about another specific niche of, I gather, highly popular in Japan, I guess, sex toys of some kind. I mean, the description was there, but, what can I tell you? I don't know anybody else who's kind of really hung up on that. Although, at least that we could say, well, I suppose if you're spending all your time with that instead of a real human being, you certainly won't be reproducing with one of these sex toys. As much fun as they might be, not that you can't also be reproducing elsewhere, but I guess, if that's your mindset, or if you're one of those people that, let's say Elon Musk, who's passing out vials of his own semen because everybody needs to be impregnated with my genius genes, and you're worried about, time spent at a sushi restaurant rather than reproducing. Well, then, okay, every moment counts, I guess, for a guy like this. And also there was some complaints about a very specific niche. I don't know what you would call it. I guess we could broadly say entertainment facilities that I've never heard of. My mind is always broadened by the bros who find out how some lonely men entertain themselves in Japan. I don't know that this information would have reached me any other way, but apparently I guess you want to broaden your mind a little bit. Again, I can't speak to the provenance of these screenshots. These days you can fake anything up and just say, oh yeah, I screenshotted it from Twitter because you don't want to go there and I don't want to give you the link. And then, of course, it's usually only a matter of hours before somebody's social media presence is more or less erased once they're arrested for something like this. But the claim was that another thing he was upset about in for some reason, Japanese culture. I don't know how he got to speaking this person about Japanese culture, but that there were something he called maid cafes, M-A-I-D, maid cafe. Never heard of it. Not something on my radar at all, but apparently places where, as he puts it, lonely salarymen would pay young girls, I don't know how directly, pay young girls to dress up as anime characters and do anime, this is what it says, like perform anime dances for them. And I don't know whether that's like dances like at a strip club dances or dances like an actual performance. I have no clue, and I don't know what anime dances are. I'm not part of that culture. Lots of people are, and it's perfectly normal otherwise. But, I mean, I guess, is this like some sort of weird, I guess, small scale, I suppose you could consider on the par with a theme park, an adult theme park, for lonely salarymen. I don't know how this enters this guy's radar, but if true, I guess you would say, he's clearly got some odd obsessions. All right. I think we can be done with the guy, but we ought to know that there's going to be some weird reporting on some odd and imbalanced sounding internet presence about this shooter, to no one's surprise. Now, on to other things that are more important to us. We really shouldn't have spent this much time on this, but it's weird and it's a cultural phenomenon, so we are. Now, other things to share with you, there are many. Here's some news about Jeffrey Clark. We all hate Jeffrey Clark. Jeffrey Clark's bid to aid Trump election scheme violated attorney rules, a D.C. bar panel finds, finally, at long last. Politico reports this. Kyle Cheney, in fact, is the reporter behind it. But, I don't know why. Oh, this is older than I thought. I thought this was some new development. Pardon. I don't remember why it was being circulated. I thought that, of course, he's up for more work in the Trump administration. But this is actually from April. And I thought that sounded familiar, but I thought that perhaps that they had maybe found that there were grounds for disbarring him, but that there was a new angle like, okay, we've finally gotten around to deciding to, yes, go ahead and disbar him. But I guess not. Okay, well, that's old news then, and I guess I won't. We'll just erase that part. Get rid of it. We didn't waste any time telling you about that. I wish I had grabbed the post that it came with so that we could have the context of it. Why was this being brought up at this point? Okay, let's see. Oh, yes, right. I still have to look around to see whether maybe I can search Blue Sky and see whether Asha Rangappa has come up with her promised written statements about just how bad Kash Patel can get for the rest of us. But she put together a video that I mentioned to you that Marcy Wheeler had recommended. And in it, she promises, okay, I'm going to get around to writing this up. I just don't have the time today. But I really would like to check in and see whether there's anything. But it doesn't look like it so far. But she was making the point, and I want to reiterate it again today, that almost all of the rules and regulations that most of us think about the FBI having to comply with before opening an investigation into someone and or announcing that investigation, that of course there has to be some probable cause for launching such an investigation, and that it has to get certain approvals, particularly if it's a public figure, and the very careful steps built up in the years since the abuses of both J. Edgar Hoover and Richard Nixon and Watergate, all of which are meant to stand as barriers to the politicization of the Justice Department in general and the FBI in particular, and the use of investigatory power for political purposes, but which have been slowly eroding, including, of course, James Comey's decision to ignore it all and make some rather careless, if not calculated, announcements right before the 2016 election that many people point to when trying to figure out what cost Hillary Clinton the election in 2016 and sent us spiraling into fascism and a destruction of the United States of America. These important guidelines, in other words. And when they're disregarded, there are severe consequences. That's why those regulations are there, because the violation of them has severe consequences. But Asha reminds us in her video, they are just norms, and they can, in fact, be ignored and brushed past. We've seen it even in a well-organized, well-run Democratic administration of Barack Obama. stuck with a Republican director of the FBI because of the 10-year term. And if you respect that norm, you let them stay there, even though this, as it turns out, Comey's the kind of person who will disregard the rules for some strange political reason and revert to Republicanism right at the critical moment. But normally these things don't happen. But if a concerted effort is made by a rogue-ish or loyal to a Republican lunatic fascist-ish attorney general and director of the FBI, they can, between them, simply trash that whole system, throw it all out, and there aren't any charges you can bring against them. You can just say, hey, that's not the way business is usually done. And they'll say, yep. And the politicized investigations will have begun, and there will be nothing we can do except point and say, they didn't used to do this sort of thing. All right. But yeah, no indication from her social media profile that Asha Rangappa has gotten around to writing this thing. But it's only Tuesday. But, all right. But, there's more about what, Kash Patel is up to and might be able to pull on us. Yesterday we were reading from the Mother Jones profile of him and the, likely fallout from Patel's move, if it actually happens, to the FBI. We were reading from David Korn, who had a lengthy piece in Mother Jones, and maybe we ought to pick up with just a little bit more of that, because I think we were getting to the point where it was sort of just getting good. Is this where we were here? I think so. We had concluded with that Patel had been a useful idiot for Putin, which was kind of the theme of the headline here, that Patel had been engaged, as he says, for 8 years in Soviet-style revisionism, create a sham story and airbrush out the truth. In other words, it was his task in the Trump administration and in Congress while he was working there for Devin Nunes to latch onto, to seize on the improprieties, the violation of those rules, those norms that the FBI is supposed to be following in the case of applying for FISA warrants to monitor the activity of Carter Page. And apparently some corners cut there, true, but ultimately the investigation into the Trump-Russia connection, it was found, was not predicated on these errors, these abuses that led to the surveillance of Carter Page. They were related in that Carter Page was thought to be colluding with the Russians in aid of Trump's election efforts, but Trump and Trump Circle members were also colluding with Russia in aid of Trump's election efforts, and you didn't need the Carter Page connection to land there. But it was Kash Patel's job to point to that, wave his hands, and say, now all investigations into connections between Trump and Russia are suspect because this one over here, which didn't lead to this, was suspect. And so if that's suspect, shouldn't everything be suspect? That was his main task. And now, somebody who intentionally conflates those sorts of things, the kind of thing that the sort of mind and the sort of practitioner that you actually would want at the head of the FBI should be assumed to have, he very pointedly does not, and he will brush it all aside for constructing a political narrative that is useful to him. That's not what you want at the FBI. So, in addition to all of that, there is, of course, the particular danger of the sorts of things that he is inclined to believe. Korn continues this way: given that Patel, a QAnon supporter who has peddled the big lie that the 2020 election was stolen from Trump and championed the ridiculous idea that the January 6th riot Trump incited was sparked by, quote, strange agitators and federal agents of, who he'd be the boss of, I guess. if he gets to the top of the FBI. He has sued his critics for defamation, and says, given that he has done all of this, let me be explicit. By calling him a useful idiot, I'm not suggesting that he has been a Russian asset or in cahoots with Russian operatives, but his effort to help Trump escape the treasonous stench of the Trump-Russia scandal by promoting a misleading account of this affair has been of tremendous value to Moscow. Patel essentially created a false alibi for Trump and a distraction that took the heat off Trump and Russia. And he has vowed to seek revenge against those deep state schemers who he claims illegally plotted against Trump by investigating the Russia matter at all, right? The distorted view of reality Patel pushes. They are the wrongdoers in this episode, not Trump and not Putin. Patel has stopped selling that's odd. He stopped selling this bunk? No, he hasn't stopped selling this bunk. That's the problem. And that's actually what Korn says here. Yesterday, wow, he sent out an email solicitation for the foundation he operates under the subject heading, "The Deep State Cannot Be Trusted," that opened with this exclamation, "Remember Russiagate? Fraud!" Okay, so still on that bandwagon, and in fact, driving it. One component of the FBI's mission is to counter Russian espionage and covert actions aimed at the United States. That seems like a problem, right? Is this a mission Patel can take on? There are few MAGA advocates who have done more than him to help Trump and Putin dodge accountability for their devious misdeeds of 2016. Placing Patel in charge of the FBI could be akin to putting it in the hands of a mole. One can imagine the joy within the Kremlin prompted by the prospect of Patel leading this critically important agency. The Russians certainly would have reason to call him our man in the bureau. So, golly, that seems probably pretty dangerous. Oh, and it looks like we've actually reached the end of this piece. The scroll indicator here looks like we had a long way to go, but it's in fact because there are several articles stacked up on the same page. But that's the end of the good, too, because I really wanted to get to some other material, both about Kash Patel and others. And there is another one waiting here from NBC News. Also, similarly, a profile here. Give us a little more information, a little wider background on Kash Patel. I also was interested in the headline that got stuck on this one. I have questions about it. It's not a major issue, but it was just a little bit odd. Headlines, carry more water than they really are supposed to. And the body of the article suggests something different. This is Brandy Zadrozny, who we read fairly frequently from over at NBC News. Trump's FBI pick co-hosted a show for a conspiracy-filled far-right media organization. Okay, the show could get fresh scrutiny as Kash Patel faces Senate confirmation hearings, just as it would if I was in front of the Senate for confirmation hearings at some point. You'd have years of recordings of crazy spoutings. Mine, almost as crazy as Kash Patel's. But I was interested in the formulation in the headline here. Trump's FBI pick co-hosted a show. He did. He had a co-host. But see, the thing is, right here in the first paragraph, rampant FBI misconduct, election fraud, and the deep state. Such were the weekly topics on this show. Not this show, but the show that we're concerned about that Kash Patel co-hosted. What was the name of the show? The name of the show was Kash's Corner. Okay, he had a co-host, but I mean, he hosted the show, right? It's Kash's Corner. But I think that they were trying to shoehorn in how prominent the role of another weirdo conspiracy theorist person that you will recognize through the affiliations anyway, as being possibly completely unbalanced and in close association with the putative FBI director here. And hoping that the headline would do the work of making you say, co-host, who is the other host? But really, okay, Kash Patel was the host. Well, this, of course, it was the eponymous online show hosted by President-elect Donald Trump's pick to lead the FBI from 21 to 23. Kash Patel made content for the Epoch Times. Remember them? A news organization known for its far-right conspiracy theories, its association with a Chinese dissident religious group, and since June, a sprawling multi-million-dollar money laundering scheme allegedly perpetrated by one of its top executives. Now, NBC News reviewed 79 episodes totaling over 45 hours of content featuring Patel and his co-host, the co-host being Epoch Times senior editor, it's Jan, I don't know whether it's Jan, pronounced Jan, but Jan, Jekielek, maybe? Jekielek. I mean, it could be Jan Jekielek, or it could be Jan Jekielek, or Kielik, or I don't know what. I'm not up on my Epoch Times, guys, but Epoch Times as a publication I recognize. Anyway, neither of the two are accused in the federal case. Which federal case? I don't know. But, the money laundering scheme. Okay. Together, they spun detailed but unfounded claims of conspiracies involving government officials, law enforcement agencies, the media, and tech companies, among others, all aiming to rig elections, silence conservative voices, naturally, and undermine Trump's presidency and re-election. Billed as a show where the former deputy director of national intelligence would, quote, break down the biggest issues of our day, from the origins of COVID-19, which, come on, to the politicization of the intelligence community, which he was hoping to run himself later on. Kash's Corner offered commentary on the news, often with a conspiratorial flourish. The show, available only to Epoch Times subscribers, could receive fresh scrutiny as Patel faces Senate confirmation hearings. His lack of experience, his promotion of politically motivated conspiracy theories in a book vilifying the FBI, and his public remarks promising to come after judges, lawyers, and the media involved in Trump's many legal investigations are also likely subjects. It wasn't just his namesake show. Patel was a constant contributor across Epoch Times properties, appearing on other shows, on the sister television network, NTD TV. I don't even know what that is. And, it's linked here. Should we take a look? I don't know. Don't want to give him any traffic, but did I say what NTD TV is? Not really, but there's a example of a video clip of him appearing on it in a Twitter post. So, all right. Anyway, that and, of course, the outlet's January 6th documentary. They made a documentary, did they? The last Kash's Corner dropped in August of 2023 with an announcement that Patel would be appearing on other shows and that the Corner would be back after the election. Wow, August 2023 he stopped? Not 24, 23. The details of Patel's contract with the Epoch Times aren't known. Financial disclosure forms filed by the talk radio and Epoch Times host Larry Elder during a failed presidential run showed the company paid between $1 million and $5 million for a similar show. Wow. A representative for Patel declined to comment. Jekielek, maybe we'll call him that, the Epoch Times editor. And the Epoch Times did not respond to a request for comment. In a June statement on the money laundering allegations, the Epoch Times said it intends to and will fully cooperate with any investigation dealing with the allegations, yada, yada, and noted that its chief financial officer, Bill Guan, G-U-A-N, Guan, I think we've read a bit about him before, had been suspended until this matter is resolved. This next section here about the Corner here, turning the corner. Kash's Corner debuted in the summer of 2021 when, after years of increasingly powerful roles within Trump's national security agencies, the former federal prosecutor was out of a full-time job following his boss's election loss. That January, he began consulting for Trump's Save America PAC, which devoted most of its spending to the ex-president's legal bills. Patel ultimately earned $325,000 for that job. In April, he started, quote, fundraising consulting for the campaign committee Friends of Matt Gaetz, pulling in $145,000 that year following news that the far-right congressman was the subject of an underage sex trafficking investigation. You know that Gaetz has denied all the allegations and that no charges were brought, but they do need to say that. Patel also set up a website, Fight for Cash. That's either with a K, meaning himself, but where he solicited donations for undefined legal efforts that promised to, quote, strike a major blow to the far left media and big tech, exclamation point. Put money in it. I'll keep it. That's awesome. It was a consequential moment for the Epoch Times, too. After years of struggling, the once fringe newspaper, powered by Falun Gong, a religious group persecuted in China, had finally found a foothold in conservative media. The company had spent a small fortune on pro-Trump ads in the run-up to 2020 and was amassing a windfall in the wake of Trump's loss, increasing revenue by a staggering 685% over 2 years to $122 million in 2021, revenue that would later come under federal scrutiny. Executives and editors credited its success to subscriptions driven by their editorial vision, really, which they said offered a counterbalance to mainstream media, with reports downplaying the January 6th Capitol riots, denying climate change, and fear-mongering about vaccines. That was the key, apparently, to survival in the journalism world, where everyone else was losing money hand over fist. They were getting 685% growth. Mysterious. Patel, a major force behind an effort to undercut the Justice Department's investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election, made sense for the Epoch Times, an outlet that had grown its audience in part by exposing what it dubbed Spygate, a disproven conspiracy theory alleging that President Barack Obama had spied on Trump's 2016 campaign as part of an intricate plot to meddle with the election and tar the incoming president with scandal. I.e., once again, every Republican accusation is a confession. There really was this collusion going on, but it was the investigation into the collusion that was the real collusion and the real election interference in their view. In one episode of Kash's Corner, Patel called the Epoch Times' intricate chart laying out the conspiracy theory, including red strings, the best one ever created in history. Geez, it sounds a little Trumpy there, don't you think? All right. In March of 2021, Yekyelek, that's what we're calling him, first interviewed Patel for an inside story of how Spygate was uncovered. This was an edition of his show that he called American Thought Leaders. By April, Patel had a show of his own. So, a rising star there at the Epoch Times. A.J. Bauer. Who's A.J. Bauer, an assistant professor of journalism at the University of Alabama who studies conservative media, said Patel brought a shared worldview and White House credentials that lent an air of authority to claims that are usually only found on the fringes. I think it was circumstance and dovetailing ideology around conspiracism and the notion of a deep state out to get Trump that landed Patel at the Epoch Times, Bauer said, and I imagine that Kash, sorry for the bad pun, brought cachet. Okay, that is a bad pun. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's march on. I don't know. It sometimes feels like we may be doing a little bit too much Kash Patel focus, but it is one of the most dangerous picks he's got. Minus perhaps Tulsi Gabbard, who, is just stealth bad, but very bad indeed, but may now face greater hurdles in the face of the collapse of the Syrian regime, which was one of her pillars of, the sort of weird counterintuitive intelligence stance she was holding on to. So long as that remained in place, she had some sort of claim on having some savvier understanding somehow of the intelligence picture and the international community than the rest of us. But now that that's collapsed, whether or not there are any records of her interaction with them, as we found out they're not great record keepers, at the very least, it will make it look like her judgment is highly suspect, right? So maybe that helps undermine her chances. But certainly any more writing on the subject that gets developed, I'd love to share with you. But for now, plenty to do with Kash. He was just much more open and forthright with his conspiracy-mindedness and the danger to or I guess maybe the norms to which he is the biggest danger. Tulsi is a big danger to norms in the intelligence community, but we're not quite as familiar with those norms And, they're clandestine by nature, the intelligence services, whereas the law enforcement in this country is supposed to be transparent and rule bound, and that keeps them in check. And it's all of those things that keep them in check that Patel is most interested in throwing out the window, and is able to do it too. Even if the stuff had been set down in statute, they would simply be ignoring statute. But here, it's just that much easier. So, on to the fraud allegations surrounding the Epoch Times here. Patel joined the Epoch Times as it appeared to be among the most successful media upstarts in the U.S., surging at a time when many other outlets, for some strange reason, were struggling to build an audience or turn a profit. The company said it was making money through subscriptions. I just really find that hard to believe. Hardly anybody is subscribing to things in general. And subscribing to the Epoch Times of all places, gosh, I really doubt it. At any rate, according to an indictment unsealed in June, there's a bit here that I skipped. The company said it was making money through subscriptions and donations. Now that might be, billionaires throwing their money at things. Well, they claim federal prosecutors say those claims rather were false. The subscriptions and donations. They see it as something different. According to an indictment unsealed in June, Guan, the Epoch Times' chief financial officer, oversaw a group within the company's Vietnam office called the Make Money Online team. That sounds super regular and not shady at all. Allegedly, the team used cryptocurrency, to buy stolen funds, including debit cards loaded with fraudulent unemployment benefits. Okay, at a discount, and then funneled, not only are they buying it, they're buying it at a discount, then funneled the laundered money into Guan's and the Epoch Times' bank accounts. Guan has pleaded not guilty and is awaiting trial. So innocent until proven guilty, can't figure out a way to decide whether he's really responsible for it, just like January 6th and Donald Trump. Golly gee, American exceptionalism, yada yada. Prosecutors claim the alleged money laundering scheme netted the group some $67 million. There's no reason to believe that Patel, Yekyelek, or anyone else in the newsroom was aware of any alleged fraud, except, 685% growth. It's unclear if or how the FBI was involved in the investigation, whether and how it would be in the future, and how having a former Epoch Times content creator as director of the agency might affect any investigation going forward. But I think you could use your imagination. The initial press release noted the charges against Guan were the result of a joint investigation between the Department of Labor's Office of the Inspector General and the State Department's Diplomatic Security Service, along with, quote, law enforcement partners, at least one of which might be the FBI. The prosecution is part of an operation by the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Forces focused on dismantling high-level criminal organizations. The FBI is a member agency of that enforcement task force. A spokesperson for the FBI referred questions about the investigation to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. Public Affairs Chief Nicholas Biase, maybe B-I-A-S-E, it's bias with an E on the end, they will note, no doubt, declined to comment. Now, next up, just the beginning. If Patel offered legitimacy to the Epoch Times' short-on-substance claims and connections to Trump that culminated in a 2022 Mar-a-Lago interview with the former president, he also brought a firebrand persona who was comfortable courting fringe audiences and selling a personal brand and apparel along the way. Anyway, Patel became a frequent guest on Steve Bannon's Real America's Voice show, where he promoted his books and Trump-themed merchandise and made his most controversial statements, including an appearance last year where he imagined what he might do with federal power. What does he say? We're going to come after the people in the media who lied about American citizens and who helped Joe Biden rig presidential elections, he said. He qualified those remarks last year, telling NBC News that he only intended to pursue those who had broken the law or, that he didn't like very much. Things were slower over at Kash's Corner, interestingly enough, less self-promotional and more cerebral, where he had more than half an hour to lay out his version of the world. Wow. Most shows ran between 30 and 40 minutes. Holy mackerel. How did he do it? On the FBI, Patel said it needed a huge overhaul, charged its leadership with going after political targets and putting the law second, as he said, and praised 3 FBI agents who had been stripped of their security clearances and had been put on leave for either being at the attack on the Capitol on January 6th or sharing conspiracy theories about the attack afterwards. Patel's foundation also provided, quote, grants of unknown size to those ex-agents, where we've proven the illegitimacy of the FBI and its actions. They've totally proven them, He said in December of 2022, falsely criticizing Russiagate and Hunter Biden's laptop as evidence of the FBI having been completely politicized, as he says. Later that month, in a way, he's right about the laptop thing, but he's, of course, saying, no, they needed to do more stupid conspiracy theories about the so-called laptop in order to be less politicized. Later that month, he suggested the FBI was part of a big tech conspiracy to censor Americans and promoted a debunked theory that the FBI paid Twitter to censor conservatives as part of, quote, the largest disinformation campaign to rig a presidential election, unquote. This is just the beginning, and if anyone thinks that was a one-off, they are completely wrong, he said. Is the FBI going to come around and say, now, we were just spending government dollars to help safeguard a nation? That's going to be the epithet they come back with. But we now know the true nature of their corrupt ways. Perfect for the leadership of the FBI. Patel often invoked what he labeled a two-tiered justice system. The FBI and DOJ are politicizing targets and manufacturing crimes. They're basically saying, show me the man and I'll show you the crime, he said on a 2022 show. In another 2022 episode, Patel voiced his concerns about what he termed the FBI's, quote, confidential human source corruption cover-up network. Easy to say. Right. He claimed the agency used confidential sources during the January 6th riots for political purposes, asking whether rioters had been goaded by agents to commit crimes and questioning the related convictions. Did, quote, those confidential human sources engage people who are not going to conduct criminal activity and convince them to do so? That's the definition of entrapment, which is illegal, and you can't charge someone who's been entrapped. Of course, you're supposed to be able to prove that there was entrapment. And they haven't. But, of course, if you're given the reins of the FBI itself, you could say, somebody get on MS Word and type up some documents that say that we've uncovered evidence of entrapment and put it out with the imprimatur of the FBI. And reporters will say, although a weirdo now runs the FBI, it is the FBI, and they say this happened, and so therefore it happened. That's the usual methodology. All right. The belief that confidential FBI sources contributed to the violence on January 6th or that the agency set up rioters is an unfounded yet persistent one. Any suggestion that the violence at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th was orchestrated by the FBI is categorically false, the FBI said in a statement to PolitiFact this year. In fact, there it is. The FBI is saying, well, that's categorically false. There's no evidence of it whatsoever, and we print it in the newspaper. Most people believe it. If next year the FBI says it is definitively true that the activity on January 6th at the Capitol was prompted by the FBI, we, whatever that means, admit it, signed Kash Patel, I guess you can start printing that in the newspaper and people will come to believe that, and that's part of the danger of putting him in charge. Patel suggested a specific solution for Congress to use the power of subpoena to uncover crimes and conspiracies via a church commission. That'll upset Joan a great deal. Similar to the 1975 congressional investigation into federal intelligence agencies. We're going to have another one now. I don't see how Americans can have any faith in this FBI anymore, unless I'm leading it. He said in December 2022, it's going to take a major overhaul, like me leading it, I'm adding, from these guys in Congress, wherein the gavel's flipped to conduct some rigorous oversight, but also to retool the FBI and DOJ so it actually has credibility again. But that's going to be a multi-year lift. As for who should be investigated first, Patel suggested in January that it be Dr. Anthony Fauci, because January 6th, wait a minute, what? No. But that's who he wants to investigate first. Of course, the former director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and a physician and immunologist who's become a major target of COVID-era conspiracy theories. Fauci, I guess, is the one-word name that you can say is deserving of an entire investigation, he said. Trump's legal woes were a popular subject, too. He's going to have to boost those if he wants to stay in good graces. In multiple episodes last year, Patel repeatedly framed multiple civil and criminal cases against Trump as politically motivated and without merit, including the Stormy Daniels hush money case, the one, of course, in which he was convicted on 34 counts. He says that's not a crime. The classified documents case, of course, about which he says, when you're president and you leave, you can take whatever you want. Just make him FBI director. The E. Jean Carroll case, about which he says, basically, a jury disregards the facts and the law and bases a decision on emotion alone. And the federal indictment accusing Trump of conspiring to overturn the election, about which he says, the criminalization of thought and free speech. Complicit in nearly every scheme, according to Patel, was the media. Oh, yeah. Now, there's a whole lot of people out there just thinking, what can I believe? Yekulek said in a 2022 show. It's hard, Patel replied. What they should believe is the Epoch Times. But I'm biased. Well, at least he admits that part of it. All right, so now we've got done with the lingering profiles of Kash Patel. Very important, again, for you to have, I think, in mind as we consider the nominations moving forward, and as we get closer to their actually being formally set down in writing and sent to the Senate. Oh, okay. I was just checking on the messages that I've gotten here. Turns out, Scott Anderson has found some GIFs of, I guess, the thing that qualifies as anime dances. I don't know whether any humans can actually do these dances, but in cartoons they can. So, all right. Well, thanks, but I kind of preferred imagining that stuff was fake. All right, let's shift gears a little bit here. I still have a million things to bring to you here. And by the way, housekeeping note, Friday. I can't do the live show Friday. It is pick up at college day for the big break, but it's also a family birthday celebration, 90th birthday, for production staff, parents, and on-air staff in-laws. So you get the idea here. But there's so much stuff here. I'm thinking that we might be able to take advantage of the backlog of stories and still bring you a all-new pre-recorded show. So taking suggestions for what needs to be a part of that. And I already have a few, and as a matter of fact, I have some material that I'd like to share with you. Certainly needs to go out before the weekend that Rosalind McGregor brought to our attention. And I would love to share that. Friday would be a great day for it. But now, shifting gears, let's see. Okay, there's a couple of things that I need to put on the record here. One is this one, and I guess I'm still waiting for a write-up on this one, but a Blue Sky posting by Aaron Reiklin-Melnick. Am I pronouncing it correctly? I don't know. We won't find out until later. A senior fellow at the American Immigration Council, and who writes that, and it's not clear where this screen grab is coming from, but we could probably Google it and find out. But the commentary here, let me read you the screen grab here first. Politico or one of the local in-house type publications. Incoming GOP leader in the Senate, John Thune, is actively seeking ways to make next year's border and defense package deficit neutral, if not deficit negative. Okay. Oh, and I guess it would be like Axios, aren't they? The ones with the why it matters. Despite pushback from House Republicans, Thune is full steam ahead on his two-part reconciliation plan for next year, sources tell us. Always a subject of some interest. What Republicans are going to try to bring under reconciliation in narrowly divided House and Senate. The border portion of this first reconciliation package, which also includes energy and defense, could be as much as $120 billion, a source familiar told us. I really should be looking this up. And maybe this is more difficult to do than meets the eye, I guess, because I got to open it. It's a screen grab, and it's not text I can lift. All that maybe I can lift it from the alt text, which is displayed down here. Yeah, let's see if I can't do that. That's a time saver. Okay, so a great argument for including your alt text with things. Okay, here's the Axios article that comes up. Senate Republicans give border crackdown top priority in 2025. Not a surprise, but this is something from yesterday. Steph W. Knight, the authorship credit on the piece. Senate Republicans give border crackdown top priority. Incoming Senate, just what we read. John Thune, actively seeking ways to make next year's border and defense package deficit neutral. That I understand. If not deficit negative, that you don't see very often. Why it matters, we just read. Top staffers in leadership and committee offices met Friday to start sketching out the logistics of the process. Trump advisor Stephen Miller said on Sunday that the border package will be passed by early February, indicating President-elect Trump's team is on board with the two-part plan. What is that plan? I don't know. The border portion, which also includes energy and defense, could be as much as $120 billion, a source familiar told Axios. Now, you throw around numbers a lot, and you don't always have context for the numbers, but if Aaron is right here, what he comments on this $120 billion package, though it's not clear even from the Axios piece how much is from which. Border, but also energy and defense. $120 billion? Well, he comments, the GOP is apparently planning on passing a reconciliation package with as much as $120 billion in border-related funding. It's not entirely clear from what we've read so far that the $120 bill all comes under the heading of border, though. I mean, if it also includes energy and defense, how do we know how much is which? But Aaron was making this point, saying, to put that in context, if you add up every single Border Patrol budget from 1990 through 2024, adjusted for inflation, that's $121 billion, which is pretty damn close to $120 billion, which would mean, as he says, that's 34 years of funding all in 1 year in a reconciliation bill for the border. So I guess if that were to hold true, then if you were one of the people who were saying, well, the idea of deporting multiple millions of undocumented immigrants seems like fantasy. How are you going to pay for it? Usually what they would ask if a Democrat was proposing a program of this sort, but they never ask Republicans. Well, $120 billion might be a good start at paying for it. But it's just not clear here why Aaron is making the assumption that all $120 billion of a border-related portion of a reconciliation plan that also includes energy and defense is actually happening this way. And then he goes on, look, there's a correction. Brief correction. I can't count. 1990 to 2024 is actually 35 years, so a 35-year Border Patrol budget conglomeration here, not 34. Okay, that's not much of a correction. And then, let's see, this is a very important question, one we do not know the answer to yet until we get more details. Michael Kagan asking, does border literally mean border, or does it really mean any immigration enforcement anywhere? No real answer. But yeah, other questions. How much of that is for energy and defense, which is what the actual article says. The border portion of the first reconciliation package, which also includes energy and defense, could be as much as $120 billion. It would go toward wall and border agents, but also build out infrastructure at immigration and customs enforcement for Trump's deportation efforts. It could, but it could also be going to something completely different. Energy and defense. I don't understand this leap to the idea that it's all about deportation funds. Zoom in. After pressure from some Senate Republicans, Thune is gathering ideas for ways to pay for the package, likely to include hundreds of billions of dollars for defense and the border. though the exact total is not clear. One idea, overturning President Biden's student loan program, which could free up $200 billion. Sources familiar with the conversations told Axios. Some of the package could also be paid for by increased revenue through some of the energy proposals. Okay, well, I mean, basically, this doesn't really sound like it's got a clear picture of what's happening here. And we're going to have to keep watching and seeing if there's some other reporting. Because right now it's just a bunch of quotes saying some very ambitious thing may or may not happen, and it might be worth this much money, and they might be putting it into this, and they might not be, and we're not really sure. But I wanted to put it on the radar because, it's certainly a good reminder that the tool of reconciliation is available to them, and that Republicans, when in control of both houses, tend to make long-term damaging use of the reconciliation tool, usually to slash taxes for the wealthy and thereby pile on trillions of dollars to the national debt, even while saying that it's a huge concern of theirs and they definitely want to do something about it, and then not doing it and leaving for Democrats to do it later and then be criticized for austerity. Okay, just putting that out there as a very real possibility. Shifting gears once again, something else I've been holding on to for a day or two from MSNBC. Ruth Ben-Ghiat, the columnist who brings us this interesting reminder. Trump's elevation of Charles Kushner, Jared's dad, has eerie historical parallels. Authoritarianism is often a family affair. That's the historical parallel we're talking about here. Authoritarian leaders, she reminds us, do not lack negative character traits. Most of them are insecure, obsessed with revenge, vain, and brutal. But many are family men in their own fashion. Relatives often figure prominently in their inner circles, like Uday and Kusei, for instance, alongside trusted cronies and sycophants, and we definitely see that in Trump world. The leader's children may run the official family businesses, as with former Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi and, President-elect Donald Trump. Or the unofficial family business of, say, smuggling arms, diamonds, and other precious goods, as with former Congolese dictator Mobutu Sese Seko's son, Kongulo Mobutu. Oh, my God, I'm sure I ruined his name entirely, top to bottom. But okay, he's a Nepo baby dictator, so who cares? Trump's record is squarely in this tradition. You may remember, during his first term, his daughter Ivanka Trump and son-in-law Jared Kushner, who everyone loves and friends are appalled when we say things like this privately, served as presidential advisors, and the investigation, for instance, by the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington reported that the pair amassed up to $640 million in outside income while serving in the White House. His daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, has been the co-chair of the Republican National Committee since May, overseeing a purge of RNC staffers and essentially merging the committee with her father-in-law's campaign. And Lara Trump likely fulfilled Donald Trump's expectations of complete, unabashed, and perhaps blind loyalty to the candidate, in the words of former RNC chair Mark Racicot. So it's not surprising to find additional Trump in-laws among those appointed to positions in his second administration. And, of course, we're watching him pressure Ron DeSantis, who he attacked so viciously during the primaries, into naming Lara Trump to finish Marco Rubio's term in the Senate. Anyway, representing the Kushner family now is real estate executive Charles Kushner, Jared's father, who served 2 years in prison starting in 2005 after being convicted of tax evasion and witness tampering. Trump pardoned him in 2020 and last month chose him for the post of U.S. ambassador to France, a gift that comes with a palatial residence in Paris. Of course, he's not supposed to keep it, but we don't know what these guys are going to do. And it may be that with the president's approval, he clears it out of all of its art and precious artifacts and sells the mansion, pockets the money, and absconds with all the art. I don't know. He might. but he might not. Then there is Lebanese businessman Massad Boulos. Wow, what's his connection? Well, he's the father-in-law of Trump's daughter Tiffany and the president-elect's new senior advisor for Arab and Middle Eastern affairs. During the campaign, Boulos served Trump by leading outreach efforts in Michigan and elsewhere to Muslim and Arab American voters, and we know how important they were. Boulos, who comes from a prominent Lebanese political family, once backed a presidential candidate also supported by Hezbollah, how do you like that, which has been fighting in Lebanon against Israeli incursions. That might make for an awkward situation in some families. Kushner Sr. and Jr. are fervent supporters of Israel and its leader, Benjamin Netanyahu. Perhaps you've heard a little bit about him and maybe a little bit about the situation in Israel. Anyway, but not in the transactional world of the strong man who has room for everyone in his tent as long as they show devotion and loyalty to him. We need only to look at the fates of sons-in-law in authoritarian history to understand the value of family members in the inner circle. And then taking us through a history of just that situation from around the world, including lots of names that I will be unable to pronounce. But basically, you get the idea. Strong tradition of this in history everywhere.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, we were in the middle of reading Ruth Ben-Ghiat's piece here, and at this point, I think the point that we need for considering the nepotism connection here in the United States is made, but there's lots of international examples of exactly this sort of thing going on, and the Trump family sort of fitting into the same pattern. It mentions here, let's see, the son-in-law also can be a proxy for the dictator, as was the case with Benito Mussolini's son-in-law, Galeazzo Ciano, who was widely hated by Italians for trying to be a mini duce, even imitating Mussolini's habit of thrusting his jaw forward when speaking. This outward adulation likely helped Ciano become foreign minister in 1936, and yet when Ciano voted in July of 1943 to remove Mussolini from power for incompetency, along with the majority of the fascist Grand Council, his father-in-law took revenge. When Mussolini returned to power as head of a Nazi puppet state, he had Ciano executed. So, look out. Not surprising then that Pierre Jensen, Mobutu's son-in-law, waited until the dictator was terminally ill before publishing a book about the family's corruption. If you want to steal, steal a little and in a nice way. And if you steal too much too quickly, you'll be caught, was Mobutu's philosophy. Actually, sort of the reverse here in the United States. The more you steal, the less likely you are to meet any punishment for it anyway. But lots of mentions of similar activity elsewhere. In Viktor Orban's Hungary, where his son-in-law also is one of Hungary's richest men, likely due in part to the Orban government's awarding him and his company large contracts without real competition. No attempts going to be made here today to pronounce his son-in-law's name. In Turkey, where President Erdogan's sons-in-law are let's see, respectively, a chief technology officer for a firm that's the country's major producer of military drones. The other one accused by multiple foreign governments of illegal activities while serving as energy minister. How do you like that? Let's see. Moving on from Turkey. Oh, no, there's plenty more, of course, from Turkey. But at any rate, the point is that it is an international pattern both throughout history and in current practice, and naturally something we're going to want to look out for in the, coming years, let's say. All right. A couple of other things we might want to add in here. Speaking of personal loyalties, and speaking as we had about Tulsi Gabbard not getting quite enough scrutiny perhaps yet, or at least not on the show. We haven't dealt with most of it, but got a piece here from the Daily Beast, which if I can poke through and get to the original, we can credit to Sean Craig before jumping back into the pocket version of it. So we can read how ex-Tulsi Gabbard aides say that she was a devout consumer of Kremlin propaganda networks. Tulsi Gabbard, of course, whom Donald Trump plans to nominate as his director of national intelligence, was, unfortunately for all of us, a faithful consumer of Kremlin-controlled propaganda network RT. 3 of her former aides told ABC News. So the FBI director, a rabid consumer and producer of content for the Epoch Times, and the DNI, a rabid consumer of RT. The former Hawaii Congresswoman's foreign policy views, which critics say have increasingly grown soft on Vladimir Putin's Russia, have led some Democratic lawmakers to question her commitment to, like the United States, for instance. Representative Jason Crow said there are, quote, deep questions about where her loyalties lie, and Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz, without offering evidence, it is noted, claimed Gabbard is likely a Russian asset. Gabbard has repeatedly denied such claims. Gabbard's former aides, however, told ABC News that the more plausible explanation for her outlook is her media diet, as they call it. They said the former Democrat continued regularly reading and sharing articles from RT well after she was advised that it was an unreliable source of information. Well, these people who are telling me that RT is unreliable should be replaced by me at the head of the national intelligence community, and I will advise myself and others like me that RT is just good, clean fun, and we should all be reading it for our information. Well, okay, except not okay. The aides emphasized Gabbard would also consume news from a wide range of outlets, including left-wing and right-wing blogs, which by itself is not so terrible, but maybe worries people a little bit. The State Department has, for nearly a decade, deemed RT a Kremlin mouthpiece and has heightened its scrutiny of the outlet in recent years. In September, officials warned the American public that the outlet's activities have stretched beyond mere news. We now know that RT moved beyond simply being a media outlet and has been an entity with cyber capabilities, whatever that might mean, the State Department wrote. It is also engaged in information operations, covert influence, and military procurement, as opposed to simply, putting a spin and an angle on the news that may be pro-Kremlin or at least undermine Kremlin competitors / enemies. They're actually being more active in launching disinformation, I guess, is the implication here. Earlier that month, the Justice Department indicted 2 former RT employees for allegedly laundering nearly $10 million to a plot that paid right-wing influencers to, quote, disseminate content deemed favorable to the Russian government, unquote. Never any money for me. Gabbard quit the Democratic Party in 2022 and drifted into the Trump orbit over the next 2 years, finally going full MAGA by joining the Republican Party in October. Her views on Russia's, and this sort of reminds me of a very frequent pattern, I guess, that we see. Not always do the people who do this rise to the level of being nominated to become Director of National Intelligence, but generally speaking, people who find comfort in, I guess, confirmation of priors in media outlets later determined to be Russian propaganda networks, and who I guess are just so addicted to finding confirmation of their priors in these outlets that they say, it can't be the case that I've been misled here. It must really be the case that the people saying that this is propaganda are themselves the propagandists. And I need to work to undermine them so that I can legitimately continue to enjoy reading confirmation of my priors at this media outlet. And why don't we stop the people who are saying that this is propaganda from saying it by arresting them as the real propagandists? Isn't there some way that we could do that? And the answer is, in Trump world, we will let you do that. We encourage you to do that. We want to do that very badly, and we would love it if you would carry that water for us. And then people who start out as Democratic Party, members of Congress, or left-leaning journalists, for instance, who suddenly find themselves out of step, are told that, well, there is a different party that will welcome you in all of this. And if you want to continue to confirm your priors with that news outlet, we'll allow you to do it. While we, also say that all Democrats are vampire pedophiles. If you'll just hang on through that part, or if you want to, you could later adopt it. It's available to you, but we'll coddle you in allowing you to continue to confirm your priors with your preferred media outlet if you like. And it's working. Well, anyway, back over to Daily Beast. Gabbard, of course, quit the Democratic Party, ended up as a Republican by October of last year, or this year, I guess. Her views on Russia's incursions and attacks on Ukraine have notably changed from 2014, 10 years ago, when she called for, quote, meaningful American military assistance for Ukrainian forces in response to Russia's annexation of Crimea. Compare that to recent years where she has laid the blame for Russian aggression at the feet of NATO and the United States, also that she can continue to read RT, I guess. ABC obtained a 2017 memo from Gabbard to campaign staff that the outlet said lamented the United States' hostility toward Putin. No, boo-hoo. In 2014, when Russian troops annexed Crimea, Gabbard, then a first-term representative, released a statement advocating for meaningful American military assistance for Ukrainian forces and for the U.S. to invoke stiffer, more painful economic sanctions for Russia. The consequence of standing idly by while Russia continues to degrade the territorial integrity of Ukraine are clear, she wrote at the time. We have to act in a way that takes seriously the threat of Russian aggression against its peaceful sovereign neighbor. It's the sort of thing that might lead you to believe that she had control of her faculties. By 2017, however, her tune had changed. In a lengthy memo to campaign staff laying out her views on foreign policy, a copy of which was obtained by ABC News, Gabbard blamed the U.S. and NATO. She was a congresswoman, but blaming the U.S. and NATO for provoking Russian aggression and bemoaned the United States' hostility toward Putin. There certainly isn't any guarantee to Putin that we won't try to overthrow Russia's government, she wrote. Okay, ambitious. Trump's transition spokesperson, Alexa Henning, told ABC News that Lieutenant Colonel Gabbard's views on foreign policy have been shaped by her military service and multiple deployments to war zones, and where she's seen the cost of war and who ultimately pays the price, calling the former aide's take on Gabbard's media influences false and nothing but a few former conveniently anonymous disgruntled staffers. The Daily Beast has reached out to the Trump transition team for comment that Gabbard's view mirrors Russia's narrative and disinformation themes can but suggest naivete, collusion, or politically opportunistic sycophancy to echo whatever she believes Trump wants to hear, Doug London, a retired intelligence officer, told ABC. Well, that's certainly a possibility, too. All right, just keeping you up to date on what's being printed on Tulsi Gabbard as she moves towards, I guess, accepting her nomination and facing Senate scrutiny in her attempt to ascend to the Director of National Intelligence. All right. There was another piece about cabinet loyalty issues that I thought I might share. This was a bit of a sideshow. In the case of Trump loyalist Rick Grinnell, remember him? Apparently, loyalty did not trump all. He and his allies mounted an aggressive effort for the top diplomat role, according to Politico, a piece by Natalie Allison and Meredith McGraw. noting that as Richard Grenell made a bid after the election to be Donald Trump's Secretary of State. No, beat out by Marco Rubio on that one for various reasons. Why? Well, who knows. But his attempt apparently included a flurry of social media posts from MAGA influencers, which began popping up advocating for the president-elect to pick Grenell. And hey, around the same time, an associate of Grenell had approached conservative social media influencers, according to two people with knowledge of the situation, offering paid contracts of as much as 5 figures to post favorably about Grenell. That kind of money just never comes my way. What can I tell you? One such contract, obtained by Politico and not previously reported, outlined that the influencer would do so during peak posting times, that content must appear genuine, that's a bit of an LOL moment, and it could not appear as an overt advertisement or promotional message. Oh well, too bad. The proposed paid social media campaign, which the organizers told Politico never took off, but it did, just didn't work, illustrates the lengths to which people close to Grenell went to ensure he got the job, which he didn't. And Grenell, who typically goes by Rick, had made no secret in private conversations over the last 3 years that he wanted to serve as Trump's next Secretary of State. Well, me too, but anyway, he told people in Trump's orbit that it was Secretary of State or bust. As one person close to the president-elect said, well, I guess it's bust. Grenell, but I imagine it won't be. He'll accept something if it's handed to him. He loves grift, just like the next guy. Grenell, Trump's former ambassador to Germany and acting director of national intelligence. We had a chance to play the acting sound effect there. But now Tulsi Gabbard will act there as well. Was someone that Trump had been known to call his, quote, wild man, according to former administration officials, or at least one, and had been the president-elect's most loyal foot soldier throughout, or one of the most loyal foot soldiers throughout the 2024 campaign. But Trump ultimately chose Marco Rubio for the coveted state job, rewarding one of his top vice presidential contenders, though hourly much less MAGA aligned, with a key seat in his cabinet and leaving Grenell without his preferred post. Oh, boo-hoo. Grenell was offered other posts in Trump's administration, including Director of National Intelligence, which he got beat out by, or what he says he turned it down, according to two people familiar with the conversations. Most recently, he has been vocal about helping his friend Kash Patel land as FBI director, and multiple people with knowledge of the transition did not rule out the possibility Grenell will still get some kind of important role. There's no evidence directly linking the influencer campaign to Grenell. In response to a request for comment, Grenell referred the Politico reporter making an inquiry, referred to that reporter as an unserious gossip reporter, and said none of this is true, which of course means it's all true. Grenell has put in the work to demonstrate his loyalty to Trump, championing the president-elect's policies in public and private, traveling to the country to campaign for him and raising campaign cash. He's close with Melania Trump, whose only public political activities this year were with the conservative LGBT group Log Cabin Republicans, with which Grenell is affiliated. Some senators close to the president-elect, like Senator Lindsey Graham and Senator Mike Lee, praised Grenell as a standout option for Secretary of State, and Grenell even appeared alongside Trump during a meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in September. At Trump's final rally of the election, a midnight event in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where Grenell also spoke, Trump praised Grenell as, quote, a man who's very special with a great talent, which is something he says about anybody who'll stand next to him on stage. But he also went on to say, I'll never forget when I took him out of the ambassador's role. That is a parenthetical addition here. When I took him out, the happiest person in the world was Angela Merkel, Trump said of the former German chancellor. When Rick Grenell was taken out, this was the best day in Angela's life. He was not your typical ambassador. Not really a great praise for him, but okay. Trump said of German officials they really loved him, but Grenell was wise to what they were doing. All right. In addition to ambassador to Germany, Trump had entrusted Grenell with another top diplomatic role during his time at the White House as a special envoy to Serbia-Kosovo relations, or for. the relations. At the end of Trump's term, with Grenell's diplomatic push, Serbia and Kosovo agreed to restore flights between their capitals in a step toward normalization. In the period after, Grenell continued to meet with foreign leaders to promote Trump and his foreign policy as a kind of shadow Secretary of State, but then wasn't the real one. But other factors weighed against him. If Grenell was tapped for a Senate-confirmed role, his business dealings in foreign countries, among them plans to build a $500 million hotel project with Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, in Belgrade, would have been scrutinized. Oh, no. Can't have that. The former Trump official's bid for the top state job also ruffled feathers, and his open lobbying for the position had grated on people in Trump's orbit. There were concerns that his prickly personality earned him a reputation among people close to Trump for being difficult and less than diplomatic, which, if you're going to read the diplomatic corps, may be a problem. People assume the president wants a big personality who is pushing the envelope, and that's not always the case. I think there were lots of questions about whether Rick was diplomatic enough to be Secretary of State, said a person familiar with the transition. The person added, Rick was offered several positions that he turned down. It's not like he was shut out. After it was leaked that Rubio was Trump's pick for state, there was an outpouring of support for Grenell among top MAGA voices who cast doubt that any decision had been made. When one person urged fellow supporters not to give up the fight because the decision wasn't final, Grenell responded, BS, stop grifting, not true. Okay. Allies, stop grifting, unlikely story. Allies of Grenell who advocated for, everything's jumped now, a pop-up, advocated for him at all costs may not have helped his cause either. Rick Lowry, a former chair of the Political Youth Association Young Republicans, who's an associate of Grenell, and probably not young, had contacted conservative influencers after the election offering payments in exchange for positive posts about Grenell on X and Instagram. The contract outlined that the influencers must also engage in their comment section, quote, tweet, share, add to stories, and reply in relevant threads and posts. The money, which was to be paid by Magnify Media Partners, LLC, a political consulting firm run by Taylor Strand, would be issued in several installments between November and January, the contract stated. Strand said in an email that the initiative in question was a project about defending Trump loyalists against mainstream media attacks, but that this project never moved forward and Rick Grenell nor any other MAGA leaders were involved. She did not respond to follow-up questions about influencers being asked to post positively about Grenell's bid for Secretary of State. Neither Lowry nor the influencer for whom the contract was created, I guess they stay anonymous, commented for the story. A spokesperson for the Trump transition didn't comment. It's not inconceivable that Grenell could eventually secure his dream job of Secretary of State should Rubio leave the post over the next 4 years, according to two people with knowledge of the situation. If he's not doing something or accepting something, it's because he decided not to. Yeah, you heard me, said one ally of Grenell. He decided not to. Speaking on condition of anonymity, explaining that he was still being given options to work for Trump, but noting Grenell's proclivity to play the long game and waiting for the job he really wants. The round of appointments that's played out over the last couple of weeks has showcased how some people have been more successful than others at maneuvering Trump world and finding a landing place. Trump made loyalty a key criteria when picking his cabinet, was turned off by any whiff of inconstancy. Not really. There's plenty of it out there. Well, I mean, his vice president, for instance. He just ignores the stuff. But anyway, things like rumors of presidential ambitions or past criticisms of his behavior, and he was irritated to learn if anyone felt entitled to a role, presumed it was theirs, or tried to buy his favor, according to multiple advisors. Really? I don't think so. Still, Trump has rewarded strategic persistence from contenders for top-level positions who got passed over for their first choice of position. Matt Whitaker, Trump's former acting attorney general, who was vying for the top Department of Justice job, ultimately wasn't tapped for attorney general, but after Trump chose Matt Gaetz for attorney general, who later withdrew and was replaced by Pam Bondi, Whitaker worked to remain in contention for other high-level jobs and was named U.S. ambassador to NATO. And Patel, a top Trump ally, tapped in recent days as FBI director, fought for the job even after it appeared his chances were dim and after some Trump advisors expressed concern about his likelihood of being confirmed in the Senate. I think there's a need and a desire to keep those people close, said a person with knowledge of Grinnell's situation, referencing others like Trump's former trade representative Robert Lighthizer, who also hasn't landed an administration job yet. They're all loyalists who have been really successful at getting Trump elected. Where does Trump park these people? Where do they park these people? It's a good question, Jerry. We just don't know the answer yet. Okay, let's see. A couple minutes remain here. How about I share something different with you in a what will be a setup for Greg tomorrow. I guess we could look at it that way because there's a mention of one of our favorite subjects as between us. This from the Yastrabulyansky's Substack. Perhaps you know him via social media and hope that you never have to say his name aloud. But you have no doubt seen, I'm sure, his online postings and social media presence. I have no idea how you smoothly say this aloud. Yastrabulyansky's. Okay, well, he's got a Substack in addition to all of his very prolific Twitter and now Blue Sky activity. The last postmortem, he titles this piece. I swear I'll stop after this, but the last election postmortem. And let's just get to it. Trump's rampage is what's illustrating this piece. This a 2016 GOP arcade-style game that was circulated online with Trump machine gunning various personages standing in the way of his ascension to power. Just fun by way of illustration. A popular postmortem sentiment, he begins, is the idea that what happened in the U.S. in the November election is what happened all over the place in developed democracies. We definitely heard this, even on the show, and it made some sense, too, right? In the wake of the inflation that accompanied the recovery from the COVID pandemic all over the world, when angered voters punished the ruling parties in frustration with the way democracy is seen to be failing. Then a pull quote from WBTW.com news. Let's see what it says. There is an overall sense of frustration with political elites, viewing them as out of touch that cuts across ideological lines, said Richard Wyke, W-I-K-E, Director of Global Attitudes Research at Pew Research Center. He noted that a Pew poll of 24 countries found that the appeal of democracy itself was slipping, as voters reported increasing economic distress and a sense that no political faction truly represents them. Now back to the writing here and analysis. And even though inflation in the U.S. wasn't nearly as bad in some of those other countries, our voters just did the same thing, I guess we were told. I wanted to check that hypothesis out for the flood of big elections between 2021 and 2024 and found evidence for a much more nuanced picture. A bad time for a few ruling parties, but not so great either for Trumpies and like-minded individuals on the nationalist, anti-immigrant, authoritarian side of the right. Loosely characterized as fascist below. Sue me if you don't like it. Some bullet points. Fascists threatened, but incumbents, left or right, regained control in Austria and in France. I guess that just fell apart, though. And in the Netherlands and Spain. So when we say across Western democracies, yeah, except for some major counterexamples. Incumbents, left or right, kept control where there were no conspicuous fascists in Mexico, Belgium, Finland, Japan, etc. South Korea, although they elected a right-wing president to a 5-year term. In 2022, the leftist Democratic Party increased its parliamentary majority in 2024, so the new president was never able to do anything, and in the end, he was frustrated enough to try a hopeless coup. Incumbents, right and fascists both lost in Germany. 2021 to the awkward leftist coalition that Olaf Scholz now has and has sadly collapsed as well. In the UK and in Colombia. And then fascists beat incumbents in Argentina, a personality cult Austerian president. Italy, a weird coalition of fascists, sometimes eager to be seen as moderate. And in the U.S., Then fascists were incumbents and then thrown out in Brazil and Poland, and fascists were incumbents and won in India and Israel. So really mixed results. What happened to us last month is not something typical of what happened to the industrialized countries in the wake of COVID and inflation. It's something we share uniquely with the land of perpetual hyperinflation, Argentina, and everybody else seems to have coped with COVID and inflation, where often it was higher than in the U.S., as noted, and some of them with unpopular immigration going on, especially in Italy, France, Britain, etc., more maturely. They handled it more maturely than we did. And then he says, not too sure of this, but I think Spain and Germany deserve actual praise on immigration, except for Germany's former communist East, which iconically remains the only part of the former Third Reich where fascism still has serious pull. Okay. But only in America, he notes, did people end up voting for the triple threat of fascism, the low-life gangster criminality of the New York real estate industry titan, I guess, or mogul, and invincible stupidity. Oh, I'm very late with the music here. How did that happen? Well, he theorizes, Kamala Harris got close to 7 million fewer votes, as we know, than Biden did in 2020, and Trump got almost 3 million more than he did 4 years ago. But that's not exactly it, because the battleground states, the only ones that count in our weird system, in those battleground states, Harris actually did better than Biden in Wisconsin, Georgia, North Carolina, and Nevada. Trump's victories in the 3 states that mattered most, as it turns out, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, were almost as narrow as in 2016, a total of around 230,000 votes. If Harris had won those 3, and thus the presidency, she'd still most likely have lost in the popular vote. And it's fun to imagine how the Republicans would then be screaming to get rid of the Electoral College, and the New York Times darkly concerned about how the new president's legitimacy in exactly this way that they weren't at all concerned when Republicans won in exactly the same way in 2000 and 2016. All very interesting. Bit out of time today, but I want to return to this because, like I said, there's a theme that I'd like to mine out for this, and in something we have not yet read, another postmortem in the New York Times, which theorizes that there were some major disagreements on strategy inside the campaign that resulted in some rogue efforts at the last minute. Do we believe in these things? I am not sure. But they do complain of the lack.
You have been listening to Kagro in the morning.
That's right.
David Waldman.
Hi, everybody. Yes, you've been listening to me. The lack, believe it or not, of yard signs. Yard signs actually get cited in this piece. All right, we got to return to this theme and to this post-mortem analysis because I thought it was very interesting in its insight into media buying. We'll return to this. But first, of course, we hand you over to Justice Putnam, who takes you away with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We'll be back tomorrow.